everybody. Today we're going to talk about harmonization. Harmonization is simply adding a harmony to a melody. Today we will focus on how to harmonize a simple folk melody using the 1, 4, and 5 or 5, 7 chords. Today it will be handy to have a piece of paper. This can be staff paper or just a blank piece of paper and something to write with, as well as an instrument. Preferably something that can play chords like a guitar or a piano, but you can also figure them out using any single note instruments. Okay, so a few things to review before we start. Make sure you feel comfortable with your Roman numerals, so these are just the numbers that we assign to chords in a key. Make sure you feel comfortable with scale degrees and or solfege. Today I will be using both. Later, we will work on conducting patterns, but it's good to have that in the back of your mind. And then take a quick minute and run through the 1, 4, and 5 or 5, 7 chords on your instrument. Today, we'll be working in the key of C, no sharps, no flats. Right here, I have written out all of the chords in C major, all the diatonic chords. That means all the chords in the key. And as you can see, I've changed the colors, so all the orange chords are the chords that we'll be using today. The top part up here are just the notes in the chord. Down here you have scale degrees, okay? So I want you to take a second, pause this video, and think through the solfege for the 1, 4, and 5 chords. I already did the scale degrees, so it's your turn to work on the solfege. Okay, did you do it? Here are the answers. So we're working with, for the 1 chord, 1, 3, and 5, or do, mi, sol. 4 chord, 4, 6, and 1, or fa, la, do. And the 5, 7 chord is 5, 7, 2, and a 4, or sol, ti, re, fa. Okay, so let's go through a step-by-step harmonization. The first thing you'll want to do is be working with a melody that you know. You don't have to know it really well, but well enough that you can figure out scale degrees and or solfege. Step number 2, be able to sing that melody in scale degrees or solfege. And then, oh sorry, I have that repeated twice. Number 3, identify important beats in the melody, okay? So you can do this through conducting, you can do this through tapping pulses, whatever works for you, but I would suggest trying both ways. Part A of number 3 is to look for larger leaps in the melody to help you decide where to place chords, and also look for long notes and downbeats to help with that. These are all general rules and are flexible as well, so don't worry if we don't always follow the exact rules. Number 4, we need to choose your chords. We'll talk about more how to do that later. Number 5, you need to decide what kind of cadence you want and how quickly that cadence happens. And then the last part is the most important part. It's to listen and adjust to what you hear and what you can change or keep the same. Okay, so let's start with step number 1. I am choosing your melody today. Hopefully it's one that you're at least a little bit familiar with, and if you're not, it's very short. So what I'll do is I'll just play this for you first, just the melody. Okay, so if you don't know that melody, it is Skip to My Lou, the way that I know it. I don't know the words, so I won't sing them to you, but I do know the tune. So here's what I want you to do with this tune. Here's another place where you can back up, listen to the melody again, and I want you to write down the solfege or the scale degrees of this melody the best you can. I will give you a hint. If you don't want to hear the hint, pause the video now. If you do want to hear the hint, this melody does not start on scale degree 1. If you want another hint, it starts on scale degree 3. Okay, so now go back, listen to the melody, and write down the scale degrees and or solfege for this melody. Okay, our next step, you've written down the scale degrees and or solfege. Next, we're going to look for important beats in the melody, and that will help us decide where to place chords. That's just the first step. So what I'm going to do is I'll play the melody twice. The first time, I want you to tap along. The second time, I will be tapping along, tapping the beats that I feel are most important. Okay, so first, no tapping. Okay, now with tapping. So, as a point of reference, I have written out the melody in traditional notation. I've added a time signature, no bass line because we're not working with harmony yet. In this melody here, I was tapping along with beats 1 and 3. Those felt like very important beats to me. Something to watch out for in the future is you could have pickups, so beats that happen before beat 1. You could also have faster rhythms. So far we're just working with quarter notes and half notes. Anyway, those are things to consider in the future, but for right now, this is what we're looking at. So you can take a screenshot of this melody or you can write it down yourself, but the next step I want you to do is identify leaps. So in this case, anything larger than a step. Go ahead and pause the video and we'll work on that. Okay, so if we're looking for leaps, anything larger than a step, we're looking at something like this. So I highlighted the first note because I don't know why I did. It felt nice. But after that, all the highlights correspond with a leap, which happens to happen. It happens on pretty much every important beat that we have. 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2. I didn't highlight that one. That was my mistake. Okay, so now that we've highlighted all of these beats, the next thing is to decide if this is where we want to place chords. But before we can decide what chords, before we can play any chords and put them in the right place, we need to know what we're playing. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to compare these leaps to notes in a chord, okay? So thinking in scale degrees or in solfege, I'll do a couple with you and then you can finish the rest on your own. So if you took my hint or if you didn't take my hint at the beginning, we start on scale degree 3. So we're looking at 3 here, leaping down to 1. So if we're thinking in chords, going back to our other chart, we can see here that we only have 2 chords that have, let's start with 3, sorry. We only have 1 chord that has scale degree 3 in it. That's the 1 chord, okay? We also had a scale degree 1 just in our first measure, which is found in the 1 chord and the 4 chord, okay? So we started with something that's only in the 1 chord, and our next leap was found in the 1 chord and the 4 chord. So that kind of gives us 2 options. We can either stay on a 1 chord or we can transition from a 1 chord to a 4 chord in the first measure. So either place a 1 chord here, keep a 1 chord here, or place a 1 chord here and change to a 4 chord. So here is 1 chord, 1 chord. Okay, sounded okay to me, but for the sake of experimentation, let's try a 1 chord and then a 4 chord on beat 3. Okay, that also works. So we have 2 options here based off of our chart. So in that case, do what you want, do what sounds good to you, but there's also a kind of a little trick where if you have a bunch of notes appearing in one chord compared to one note appearing in a different chord, it's a little bit more standard to choose the chord that uses multiple notes rather than just one note. So keeping that in mind, I want you to take a look at this slide that I have up here and take a minute and figure out what chords you would use based off of the solfege and scale degrees found on this page. Okay, so go ahead, pause the video, try that out, find some chords for me. Okay, hopefully you found some chords that you resonate with, that sound good to you. Something I want to point out is in these first two measures, every single note fits within a 1 chord. So we have scale degree 3, 1, 3, 5. There it is, 3, 1, 3, 5, just a 1 chord. Let's take a look at the next two measures. We have scale degree 2, 7, 2, and what is that? 4. 2, 7, 2, 4. So this is not an option that we had. This is a diminished 7th chord. Diminished 7 chord. Sorry, my bad. So in that case, we could use that, but since today we're focusing just on using 1 chords, 4 chords, and 5 chords, maybe nix that if you had that one, although it technically all fits. Okay, here again, everything fits in a 1 chord, so let's take a look at the last two measures. There are two options that I came up with. One of them is a slower cadence pattern. So the slower cadence pattern would be a 5/7 going to a 1. Okay, so that's just a regular authentic cadence. It doesn't have a faster, like a speeding up. It's matching changing chords at every measure as we were kind of doing before. Another option would be to have a 4 going to a 5/7 to a 1. So here it is again. Both are totally valid ways to interpret this. An argument for one is if you were to stay in this pattern of changing every bar, then there we go. We repeated the pattern the whole time. An argument for changing from the 4 to the 5/7 to the 1 is speeding up that harmonic progression. So instead of keeping the same pattern all the time, by changing the harmonic progression, it's showing to us that something is changing. And in this case, it's just the end of the song. So there's an argument for the other. So if you would like to check your chords against one way to do this, here is the way I did it. So you can compare what you have to what I have. Again, you can have a 4, 5, 7, 1, or just a 5, 7, and then a 1. Up to you. So now you have all the tools you need to harmonize a simple folk melody. Later, there will be more examples for you to work on. I'll actually just include those in the comment section of this video. You can figure it all out by ear. You can look up a melody and add some harmonies to it. I would suggest working as much on your own as you can, and then use your ear and listen, and your instincts will kick in and tell you if it's working, if it's not working, if you need to make changes, if everything's good. And the more you practice this, the easier it will get. So, happy harmonizing.